Horror stories of the dead they never tell you. No one ever tells you what really happens after the funeral. They say the dead rest. They say the house grows quiet. They say grief is the only thing that lingers. But grief is not what stayed behind. When Evan returned to his grandmother's house after the burial, the silence felt wrong. Too heavy. Like the walls were listening. The family had left quickly, avoiding eye contact with the house as if it might notice them slipping away. Evan stayed. Someone had to. The house sat at the end of a narrow street, old and hunched, its wooden frame creaking even when no wind blew. At night, shadows clung to corners longer than they should. The air smelled faintly of dust and something deeper, something damp. He told himself it was just an old house mourning its owner. He was wrong. The first thing Evan learned, something no one ever tells you about the dead, was that they don't leave quietly. At 2:46 a.m., the house stirred. A slow sound echoed through the hallway. Not footsteps exactly. More like dragging skin across wood. Evan lay frozen on the couch, eyes wide, breath shallow. The noise stopped just outside the living room, then came breathing, not panicked, not strained, patient. The hallway light flickered once. Then turned on. She stood there. Evan's grandmother looked exactly as she had the last time he saw her alive. Same nightgown. Same posture. Same gentle smile, but her eyes were empty. They didn't blink. They didn't focus. They simply stared, like glass covering something hollow. You stayed, she said softly. Evan tried to speak, but his throat locked. His body understood what his mind refused to accept. That thing wasn't his grandmother anymore. The second truth they never tell you about the dead is this: they don't like being recognized. When Evan whispered her name, the temperature dropped. The shadows behind her shifted, stretching unnaturally along the walls. They moved like people standing just out of sight. She floated closer, her feet never touching the floor. You didn't visit much, she said calmly. But you came back in the end. The air smelled like fresh soil. Grave soil. Evan's heart pounded as he noticed the shadows weren't hers. They were too many. Too tall. Too restless. How many are there? He asked, his voice barely a sound. Her smile widened. All of us. He ran, out the door. Into the night. Barefoot on cold pavement, the street was silent. No cars. No dogs. No wind. When Evan reached his car, his hands shook so badly he dropped the keys twice. As the engine roared to life, relief flooded his chest, until he checked the rearview mirror. They stood in the driveway. Men. Women. Children, all watching, all smiling, all dead. They didn't follow, they waved. Sleep abandoned Evan after that night. Doctors called it stress. Grief. Hallucinations caused by trauma. Evan tried to believe them. He wanted to believe them, but the dead don't care what explanations the living cling to. The next night, his phone rang at 2:46 a.m., unknown number. He didn't answer. A voicemail appeared seconds later. No words, just breathing, slow. Familiar. Close. The third thing they never tell you about the dead is this: distance doesn't protect you. Streetlights flickered when Evan walked beneath them. Reflections in windows moved when he stood still. Every dark surface felt crowded. He began seeing faces he recognized: a neighbor who drowned years ago, a cashier killed during a robbery, a classmate whose funeral he skipped. They never spoke. They only smiled. Desperate, Evan returned to the house a week later. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air felt warm, alive. The living room walls were covered in photographs that hadn't been there before. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Each photo showed the same house across different decades. Different families. Different faces, same ending. Under every photograph was a date. And a name. Each date matched a recorded death. The final photo made Evan's stomach drop. It showed him, standing in the living room, staring at the wall. The date was today, his name was written beneath it, the ink was still wet. That was when Evan understood the final truth they never tell you about the dead. They don't come back to haunt houses. They come back to replace the living. Footsteps sounded behind him, breathing, close, too close. A familiar voice whispered beside his ear. You stayed. If you're hearing this story right now, if the room feels colder than it should, if it feels like someone is standing just behind you, don't turn around, because the dead hate being ignored, and once they know you're listening, they never stop telling their stories. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more.